when a desperate mother walked 7 miles through scorching Montana heat to beg a widowed rancher to take her starving children, she expected rejection. What she didn't expect was for Caleb Mercer, a man who hadn't spoken to a child in 5 years, to look her straight in the eye and say, "I won't take your children, but I'll take all three of you." What follows is a story of survival, redemption, and a love born not from romance, but from the simple act of refusing to let someone fall alone. Stay with me until the end of this story, and if it moves you, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Eliza's journey travels. The sun hung like a copper coin in the bleached Montana sky, merciless and unblinking. Eliza Harper had stopped wiping the sweat from her face an hour ago. There was no point. Her worn calico dress clung to her back, the fabric darkened with perspiration and trail dust. Each step sent small puffs of pale dirt rising from the hardpan road, settling on her cracked boots, on the hem of her skirt, on the small hands clutching hers. 7 miles. She had walked 7 miles with her children, and the Iron Ridge Ranch still shimmered in the distance like a mirage. "Mama, I'm thirsty." The voice belonged to Thomas, her son, 6 years old, with his father's dark hair and his mother's stubborn chin. He hadn't complained once in the first 5 miles. That he spoke now meant he was past the point of endurance. Eliza's throat tightened. The canteen at her hip had been empty since dawn. "Just a little farther, sweet boy," she whispered, her voice cracked and raw. "See that stand of cottonwoods? That's where we're going." Her daughter Sarah said nothing. At 9 years old, she had already learned the hard arithmetic of survival, that words cost energy they couldn't spare. The girl's face was flushed beneath her sunbonnet, her lips pressed into a thin line that made her look far older than her years. Eliza tightened her grip on their hands and kept walking. The road stretched ahead, rutted and pale, flanked by open grassland that rolled toward distant mountains. Somewhere out there had been her homestead, 160 acres of promise that had turned to dust and debt. Somewhere out there was the grave she'd dug herself, alone, while her children watched from the cabin door. She pushed the memory down. There was no room for grief now, only forward motion, only survival. The cottonwoods grew larger, their leaves flickering silver green in the hot breeze. Beyond them rose the buildings of Iron Ridge Ranch, a sprawling complex of corrals, barns, bunkhouses, and a main house built from honey-colored logs. Smoke curled from the cookhouse chimney. Horses moved in the paddocks. Men's voices carried across the distance, rough and easy with labor. Life. The ranch hummed with it. Eliza's children had not heard laughter in 3 months. As they passed beneath the cottonwood's sparse shade, Thomas stumbled. Eliza caught him before he fell, lifting him into her arms, though her own legs trembled with exhaustion. He was lighter than he should have been. They both were. "Mama..." "Hush now. We're here." She carried him the last 100 yards, Sarah walking silent at her side. Ranch hands paused in their work to watch. A thin woman in a faded dress, carrying a child too big to be carried, trailed by a girl who looked like she'd forgotten how to smile. Eliza's heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her chin up, her gaze steady. Desperation, she had learned, was not the same as weakness, and she would not let these men see her collapse before she'd spoken her piece. A man emerged from the main house, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the deliberate economy of someone who'd spent his life working the land. He wore dusty trousers, a shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and a hat that shadowed his face. When he stepped into the sunlight, Eliza saw a face carved by weather and sorrow. Hard lines around the mouth, gray threading through dark hair, eyes the color of creekstone. Caleb Mercer. She knew him by reputation only. Widower, recluse, the richest rancher in the valley, and the most unapproachable. He stopped 10 feet away, his gaze moving from her face to the children and back again. He didn't speak. Eliza set Thomas down, keeping one hand on his shoulder. Her voice, when it came, was steady despite the tears burning behind her eyes. "Mr. Mercer, my name is Eliza Harper. My husband, James Harper, died 4 months ago. I've come to ask..." Her throat closed. She forced the words out. "I've come to ask if you'll take my children into your household. They're good workers, both of them. They won't cause trouble, they just need..." "Food," Caleb said quietly. "Water, a roof." Eliza nodded, unable to speak. And you? She blinked. Sir? What about you, Mrs. Harper? Are you planning to walk back to wherever you came from? Alone? The question was blunt, without judgment, but it landed like a fist to her chest. Because she hadn't thought past this moment, hadn't let herself imagine beyond the possibility of her children's survival. The idea of turning around, of walking back into that empty cabin, of waking each morning to silence. I'll manage, she whispered. Will you? It wasn't a question. Caleb Mercer's gaze held hers, and for a moment she saw something flicker in those gray eyes, recognition, perhaps. The understanding of someone who knew what it meant to stand on the edge of the abyss and lie about the view. I won't separate them from their mother, he said. Eliza's knees went weak. Mr. Mercer, I didn't come here to beg for charity. I know what you want. He glanced at the ranch hands watching from the corrals, then back to her. But I won't do it. If your children stay, you stay. She stared at him. I can't. I have nothing to offer in return. No money, no... Can you cook? Yes. Can you mend? Yes. Can you work? Yes. The word came fierce and fast. I can work, Mr. Mercer. I've been working since I was younger than my daughter. I'm not asking for a handout. Good. He turned toward the house. Because I'm not offering one. You'll earn your keep, all three of you. There's a cabin behind the bunkhouse. Used to be the foreman's quarters before he built himself a house in town. It's yours if you want it. Meals with the hands, laundry, and mending for the outfit, help in the cookhouse during branding and harvest. In exchange, you get wages, board, and your children get a childhood. Eliza's vision blurred. She tried to speak and couldn't. Caleb paused, looking back over his shoulder. That acceptable to you? Yes, she managed. Yes, sir. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. His voice was dry, almost bitter. You haven't seen the laundry pile. He walked toward the house, and Eliza realized she was supposed to follow. She took Thomas's hand, Sarah's hand, and together they crossed the dusty yard of Iron Ridge Ranch. Behind them, the road stretched back toward everything they'd lost. Ahead, the future waited, uncertain, fragile, but possible. For the first time in 4 months, Eliza Harper allowed herself to hope. Puset. The cabin was small but solid. One room with a stone fireplace, a rope bed, a table and 2 chairs, shelves built into the log walls. Dust covered everything, and the air smelled of disuse, but the roof was intact and the windows had glass. There's a pump outside, Caleb said from the doorway. Cookhouse is the building with the blue door. Mamie's in charge there. She'll show you the ropes. Bunkhouse is off limits unless you're delivering laundry. Any problems with the hands, you come to me. Understood. Yes, sir. He nodded, started to turn away, then hesitated. There's jerky and bread in the cookhouse. Tell Mamie I said to feed you, all of you. Mr. Mercer. Eliza's voice broke. Why are you doing this? His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Because someone should have done it for me once, and no one did. He left before she could respond. Sarah moved to the window, peering out at the ranch yard. Thomas sat on the edge of the bed, swinging his legs, too tired even to explore. Eliza stood in the center of the room, her hands shaking now that there was no one to see. They were safe. For now, they were safe. She pressed her palms to her face and allowed herself 30 seconds of silent tears. Then she wiped her eyes, straightened her spine, and went to find the pump. Work, Caleb Mercer had said. She could do that. She'd been doing it all her life. What she didn't know yet was that work would be the easy part. Mamie turned out to be a woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair, flour-dusted hands, and a voice like creek gravel. She took one look at Eliza and the children and set 3 plates on the cookhouse table without a word. Beef stew, fresh bread, milk. Thomas ate so fast he made himself sick. Eliza had to slow him down, her own stomach twisting with hunger and guilt. When had she last given them a real meal? When had she last eaten one herself? You the new laundress? Mamie asked, kneading dough on the far counter. Yes, ma'am. Caleb tell you the rules? Some of them. I'll tell you the rest. Mamie didn't look up from her work. No gossip, no drama, no complaining. The hands are rough men, but they're good men. Treat them with respect, and they'll do the same. Caleb don't tolerate otherwise. I understand. Do you? Now Mamie did look at her, dark eyes sharp. Because this ranch has been a tomb for 5 years. No women, no children, no laughter. Caleb built that tomb himself and locked himself inside it. You and yours just cracked the door open. That's going to change things. Eliza met her gaze. I'm not here to change anything. I'm here to survive. Surviving changes things, Mamie said quietly. Whether you mean it to or not. The first week passed in a blur of labor. Eliza woke before dawn to help Mamie prepare breakfast for 20 ranch hands. She scrubbed pots, peeled potatoes, kneaded bread until her arms ached. After breakfast, she hauled water, built fires under the laundry cauldrons, boiled and scrubbed and wrung and hung clothes until her hands were raw. Sarah helped without being asked, her small face serious, her hands careful with the folding. Thomas ran errands, fetching firewood, carrying messages, filling water buckets. The ranch hands took to calling him Little Boss, and he began to smile again. Eliza saw Caleb Mercer only at a distance. He was always working, riding fence lines, breaking horses, settling disputes, moving through the rhythm of the ranch like a man who'd forgotten how to be still. He spoke little and smiled less. The hands respected him, but they didn't joke with him the way they joked with each other. He was, Eliza realized, profoundly alone in the middle of his own empire. On the 8th day, she was hanging laundry when she heard shouting from the corrals. She turned to see a knot of men gathered around the breaking pen, where a young horse, barely more than a colt, was rearing and plunging against the lead rope. Caleb stood at the center of the chaos, his voice low and steady, trying to calm the animal. The horse screamed and lashed out with its front hooves, and Sarah, who had been carrying a basket of linens across the yard, froze in place, directly in the animal's path. "Sarah!" Eliza dropped the shirt she was holding and ran. But Caleb was faster. He moved like water, stepping between the child and the horse, catching the lead rope with one hand and Sarah's arm with the other. The horse reared again, hooves slashing the air inches from Caleb's head, but he didn't flinch. He pulled Sarah back, shielding her with his body, and spoke a single word. "Easy." The horse came down hard, snorting and trembling. Caleb held the rope steady, his voice a low murmur Eliza couldn't make out. Slowly, the animal's breathing slowed. Its ears flicked forward. It took one tentative step toward Caleb, then another. He reached out and touched its nose. The horse blew out a long breath and stood still. Eliza reached them, her heart slamming against her ribs. "Sarah, I'm all right, Mama." But the girl's voice shook. Caleb handed the lead rope to one of the hands and turned to Sarah. He crouched down to her level, his expression unreadable. "You hurt?" "No, sir." "You know why that horse spooked?" Sarah shook her head. "Because he's scared. Someone hurt him before he came here. Now he thinks everyone's going to hurt him. So when he sees something new, he panics." Caleb's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "You ever feel like that?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. She nodded. "Then you understand him better than most folks would." Caleb straightened. "If you want, you can help me with him. Teach him that not everyone's dangerous, but only if you want to." Sarah glanced at Eliza. "Can I, Mama?" Eliza looked at Caleb Mercer, at this hard, silent man who just offered her daughter something more precious than safety. He'd offered her purpose. "Yes," Eliza whispered. "You can." "He must soon be, That night, after the children were asleep, Eliza stood outside the cabin and looked up at the stars. The air smelled of sage and wood smoke. Somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called. She heard footsteps and turned to see Caleb walking toward the main house, his hat in his hands. "Mr. Mercer?" He stopped, waited. "Thank you," she said. "For Sarah. For all of this." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "Your daughter's got a gift with animals. Be ashamed to waste it. She gets that from her father." "What happened to him?" Eliza hesitated. She hadn't spoken of it to anyone. But something in Caleb's stillness, his lack of pity, made the words come easier. "Pneumonia. Last winter. We didn't have money for a doctor. By the time I realized how bad it was..." She stopped. "He died in our bed. I buried him on the homestead." "I'm sorry." "Are you?" She hadn't meant it to sound bitter, but it did. Caleb looked at her with those gray, unreadable eyes. I buried my wife and daughter 5 years ago. House fire. I was out checking fence lines. By the time I got back, there was nothing left but ash. His voice was flat, emotionless. So yes, Mrs. Harper, I'm sorry, because I know exactly what it costs. Eliza's anger drained away. I didn't know. No reason you should. He put his hat back on. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. He walked away, and Eliza stood in the darkness, understanding for the first time why he'd let them stay. Not out of kindness, not out of charity, but because he knew what it meant to survive when you'd lost everything worth living for. And sometimes, the only way to remember how to live was to help someone else do the same. 3 weeks into their stay at Iron Ridge, the pattern of their days had settled into something almost like normalcy. Eliza worked from dawn until dusk, but it was honest work with fair pay. The children thrived, color returning to their cheeks, laughter returning to their voices. Sarah spent every spare moment with the young horse, whom she'd named Chance. Under Caleb's quiet instruction, she learned to approach him, to read his body language, to offer trust without expecting it to be returned. The horse, in turn, began to gentle, to accept her presence, to nicker softly when she approached the corral. Watching them together, Eliza saw her daughter transform. The frightened, silent child who'd walked 7 miles in the dust was becoming someone new, someone brave, someone hopeful. And Caleb, too, was changing. He smiled at Sarah's victories. He answered Thomas's endless questions with surprising patience. He spoke more at meals, sat longer on the porch in the evenings. The tomb Mamie had spoken of was opening, letting light and air back in. Then Victor Hale arrived, and everything shattered. He came on a Thursday afternoon riding a black gelding and trailing 2 hired guns. Eliza was in the yard, stirring a cauldron of boiling laundry, when the men rode past. She looked up and felt ice slide down her spine. She knew that face. Victor Hale, land baron, moneylender, the man who owned half the territory and wanted the other half. He'd come to her homestead once, 2 months after James died, with an offer to help with her debts. She'd refused, told him she'd manage on her own. Now he was here. Caleb emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. His expression didn't change when he saw Hale, but Eliza saw his shoulders tighten. Hale? Mercer. Victor Hale dismounted with practiced ease. He was a handsome man in his 40s, well-dressed, with cold blue eyes and a smile that never reached them. I hear you've taken in the Harper widow and her brats. Mrs. Harper works for me. Her children are none of your concern. Oh, but they are. Hale reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. You see, the late Mr. Harper owed me a debt, $50 for materials purchased on credit, ironwork for fencing, I believe. The debt went unpaid, which means, according to territorial law, I have claim on his property. The homestead's abandoned, Caleb said flatly. Not the homestead, Mercer. The widow. Hale's smile widened. Territorial statute clearly states that debts can be satisfied through labor. Mrs. Harper can work off what her husband owed in my household as my housekeeper. The yard had gone silent. Every ranch hand had stopped working. Eliza's blood turned to ice. Caleb took a single step forward. She works here. She works where I say she works. Hale unfolded the paper. Unless, of course, someone wants to pay the debt on her behalf. $50, Mercer. A pittance to a man of your means. But I'm curious, is she worth it to you? How much did Harper actually owe you? I told you, 50. How much did he actually owe you? Caleb's voice was hard as stone. Because I knew James Harper. He paid his debts. If he owed you money, there's a reason he didn't pay it. Hale's smile thinned. Are you calling me a liar? I'm asking for proof, the original invoice, the terms of sale, witnesses. I don't need to prove anything to you, Mercer. The law requires documentation. Caleb crossed his arms, which I'm betting you don't have, because I'm betting you invented this debt to get your hands on Harper's land. And when the widow wouldn't sell, you decided she'd do just as well. Hale's mask of civility cracked. Careful, Mercer. You're making accusations you can't back up. Then take me to court. Sue me for slander. We'll see what a judge has to say about your business practices. For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then Hale folded the paper and tucked it back into his coat. "You've got 21 days," he said quietly. "That's how long the territorial judge is giving you to contest the debt. After that, Mrs. Harper comes with me, voluntarily or otherwise." He remounted and rode out, his hired guns trailing behind. Eliza realized she was shaking. Caleb turned to her, his face unreadable. "Pack your things," he said. Her heart stopped. "What?" "Pack your things. You and the children. You're moving into the main house." "Mr. Mercer, I can't." "Yes, you can, because Hale's not going to stop with legal threats. If you're out here alone, you're vulnerable. In the main house, you're under my roof. That means something in this territory." He looked at her steadily. "I'm not letting him take you. Any of you. So pack your things." Eliza nodded, unable to speak. As she walked back to the cabin, Mamie fell into step beside her. "Caleb's going to fight this," the older woman said quietly. "He can't. The law. The law is what men like Hale twist to suit themselves. But Caleb Mercer doesn't twist easy." Mamie's voice was fierce. "That man locked himself in a tomb for 5 years because he couldn't save his family. You think he's going to stand by and watch yours get torn apart?" "He barely knows us." "He knows enough." Mamie stopped at the cabin door. "And maybe that's the point. Maybe you're giving him a reason to unlock that door." Eliza looked back at the main house, where Caleb stood talking to his foreman, his expression hard and determined. 21 days. 3 weeks to prove that Victor Hale was a liar and a fraud. 3 weeks to save everything they'd just begun to build. Eliza Harper had survived her husband's death. She'd survived starvation and drought, and the 7-mile walk that should have broken her. She'd survived this too. She had to. Because for the first time in months, she had something worth fighting for. The main house had too many empty rooms. Eliza felt it the moment she crossed the threshold. The weight of absence, the echo of voices that no longer spoke. Caleb led them upstairs without ceremony, opening the door to a bedroom that overlooked the eastern pastures. This was... He stopped, started again. "You and Sarah can take this one. Thomas, there's a smaller room next door." The bedroom was larger than the entire cabin they'd been living in. A 4-poster bed dominated the space, its quilt faded but clean. A washstand. A dresser with a mirror, curtains that caught the afternoon light and turned it gold. Sarah moved to the window, pressing her palms against the glass. "I can see Chance from here." Caleb's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "That's so." He's standing by the water trough. His ears are forward. That means he's calm. "You've been paying attention." "You're a good teacher, Mr. Mercer." Sarah turned from the window. "Are you really going to fight Mr. Hale? For us?" The question hung in the air between them. Eliza held her breath, waiting. Caleb crouched down, bringing himself to Sarah's eye level. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but absolute. "I don't make promises I can't keep. But I give you my word, Victor Hale will not take you or your mother or your brother from this ranch. Not while I'm breathing." "Why?" The word came out small, uncertain. "We're nobody to you." "You're somebody to me." Caleb stood, his jaw tight. "And that's enough." He left before either of them could respond, his boots heavy on the stairs. Eliza sank onto the edge of the bed, her legs suddenly unreliable. Sarah sat beside her, small and warm and alive. "Mama, are we safe here?" Eliza pulled her daughter close, breathing in the smell of sunshine and horse sweat and childhood. "I think," she whispered, "we're safer than we've been in a very long time." But even as she said it, doubt coiled in her chest. Victor Hale didn't make idle threats, and 21 days wasn't long enough to build a case against a man who owned judges, sheriffs, and half the territory's politicians. Downstairs, she heard Caleb's voice, low and urgent, speaking to someone she couldn't see. Planning, strategizing, preparing for a fight he couldn't afford to lose, for people he'd known less than a month. Eliza closed her eyes and let herself feel the full weight of what he was risking. His reputation, his standing in the territory, possibly his life, if Hale decided legal means weren't working fast enough. All for a widow and 2 children who had nothing to offer in return but gratitude and hope. She didn't understand it, but she felt it, the stubborn, reckless generosity of a man who'd learned too late that some things couldn't be saved and had decided he'd be damned before he'd let it happen again. That evening, Mamie served dinner in the main house for the first time in 5 years. The dining room table, massive and scarred from decades of use, had been set for five, Caleb at the head, Eliza and the children along one side, and Mamie herself at the far end. "Caleb never eats in here," Mamie said, setting down a platter of roasted chicken. "Says it's too big for one person, but it's just right for a family." Caleb shot her a look that could have cut glass. Mamie ignored him with the ease of someone who'd known him since he was in short pants. Thomas stared at the food with wide eyes. "Is this all for us?" "Every bit of it," Mamie said. "And there's pie after, so save room." They ate in near silence, the clink of silverware loud against the quiet. Eliza watched Caleb from the corner of her eye. He ate methodically, his gaze distant, clearly uncomfortable with the intimacy of shared meals. "Mr. Mercer," Sarah said suddenly, "what are you going to do about Mr. Hale?" "Sarah," Eliza warned, "it's all right." Caleb set down his fork. "We're going to prove he's lying. That means finding people who've had dealings with him, getting their testimony, building a case the judge can't ignore." "How many people do you need?" "As many as we can find. Hale's been operating in this territory for 15 years. He's left a trail. We just have to follow it." "What if the judge is on his side?" Thomas asked, his voice small. Caleb met the boy's eyes with surprising gentleness. "Then we go over his head, to the territorial governor, to the federal marshal, as far as we need to go to get justice." "That could take months," Eliza said quietly. "We don't have months." "Then we work fast." Caleb pushed back from the table. "I'm riding to Shepherd's Bend tomorrow. There's a blacksmith there who did business with your husband. If Hale claimed James bought materials on credit, the blacksmith will know. He keeps records of every transaction." Eliza's heart leapt. "James always paid cash. He didn't believe in credit. That's what I'm counting on." Caleb stood. "I'll be gone 3 days. Ben Murphy's my foreman. Anything you need, you go to him. Mamie will look after you. And Mrs. Harper," "Yes?" "Lock your doors at night. All of them." The words sent ice through her veins. "You think Hale will come here?" "I think he's a man who's used to getting what he wants, and I think he doesn't like being told no." Caleb's expression was hard. "So you lock the doors. And if anyone comes around who isn't supposed to be here, you fire a shot. The hands will come running." He left the room, and Eliza realized her hands were shaking. Mamie reached across the table and squeezed her wrist. "He'll keep you safe." "He's one man, Mamie. Hale has an army." "Caleb Mercer is worth 10 of Hale's hired thugs." Mamie's voice was fierce. "And he's got this whole ranch behind him. Every hand, every wrangler, every man who's ever worked this land. They're loyal to Caleb. They'll fight for him." "But will they fight for us?" Mamie smiled, sad and knowing. "Honey, they already are." Caleb left before dawn, a bedroll tied behind his saddle and a rifle in the scabbard. Eliza watched from the kitchen window as he rode out, his figure dark against the pale morning sky. Then she turned to face her own battle, keeping her children safe and occupied while fear gnawed at the edges of every moment. Sarah spent the morning with Chance, and Eliza watched from the corral fence as her daughter moved with quiet confidence around the young horse. The animal had gentled considerably in the past weeks, no longer rearing and plunging when approached. Now he stood still for Sarah's touch, his dark eyes soft, his breathing calm. "He trusts you," Ben Murphy said, leaning on the fence beside Eliza. The foreman was a wiry man in his 50s, weathered and competent. "That horse came here half wild. Caleb thought we might have to put him down, but your girl's got a gift." Her father had the same one. James Harper. "I knew him a little. Good man. Honest." Ben glanced at her. "Is it true what they're saying, that Hale's claiming he owed money?" "That's what Hale says. And you don't believe it." "I know my husband, Mr. Murphy. He'd go without food before he'd leave a debt unpaid. If he owed Victor Hale money, there would have been a reason. A damned good reason." Ben nodded slowly. "Hale came sniffing around here a few years back. Wanted to buy water rights to the creek that runs through Caleb's north pasture. Offered good money. Caleb turned him down flat. Said some things aren't for sale." He paused. "Hale's the kind of man who doesn't forget a slight. If he thinks Caleb's standing between him and something he wants, he'll come at him sideways. Through you, maybe." Eliza's stomach tightened. Then we need to make sure Caleb's trip isn't for nothing. What are you thinking? I'm thinking we need our own proof, letters, receipts, anything James might have kept that shows he paid his debts. She turned to face Ben fully. The homestead's abandoned. Everything we owned is still there, including James's desk. You want to go back? I need to go back. If there's evidence, it's there. Ben studied her for a long moment. Caleb told me to keep you safe. Riding out to an abandoned homestead doesn't sound safe. Neither is sitting here waiting for Victor Hale to make his move. Eliza's voice was steady. I can't fight him with my hands, Mr. Murphy, but I can fight him with the truth. If you won't take me, I'll walk. Hell. Ben scrubbed a hand over his face. All right, but we go armed, we go fast, and we're back before sundown. And if Caleb asks, this was your idea. Deal. They rode out an hour later, Eliza on a steady mare and Ben on his roan gelding. Thomas stayed behind with Mamie, but Sarah insisted on coming, partly because she didn't want to be separated from her mother, partly because she remembered where her father had kept his papers. The ride took 2 hours across open grassland that shimmered with heat. Eliza's homestead sat in a shallow valley, the cabin small and dark against the pale earth. As they approached, her chest tightened with memories, James laughing as he raised the ridgepole, Sarah taking her first steps on the porch, winter evenings spent reading by firelight while the wind howled outside. Now the windows were empty. The door hung crooked on its hinges. Prairie grass had begun reclaiming the yard. You all right? Ben asked quietly. No. Eliza dismounted. But I will be. The interior was worse than she'd imagined. Dust covered everything. Mice had nested in the mattress. The table where they'd shared 1,000 meals stood crooked on 3 legs, the 4th broken off and lying in the corner. Sarah went very still in the doorway. It's so small. It was home, Eliza said, and it will be again someday, once this is over. She moved to the desk, a simple pine piece James had built himself with 3 drawers and a writing surface scarred by years of use. The top drawer stuck, swollen with moisture, but she wrestled it open. Papers, letters, receipts. She spread them on the desk, sorting through with shaking hands. A receipt for lumber purchased in town. A letter from the land office confirming their claim. The deed to the property, signed and sealed. And there, near the bottom of the stack, a ledger. Eliza opened it and felt her heart stop. James had kept meticulous records. Every purchase, every sale, every penny spent or earned. She flipped to the last entries dated just weeks before his death. Iron fencing materials purchased from Victor Hale, $50. Paid in full, cash, February 14th. The notation was in James's careful hand with the date and Hale's initials beneath it, proof that the debt had been satisfied. Ben, her voice shook. Ben, look at this. The foreman leaned over her shoulder, reading. His expression darkened. That son of a bitch. He knew James paid him. He knew, and he came after me anyway. Because dead men can't testify. Ben's jaw was tight, and widows are easy targets. Sarah moved closer, looking at the ledger. Papa always wrote everything down. He said a man's word is only as good as his records. Eliza pulled her daughter close. He was right, and this record is going to save us. A sound outside froze them all, hoofbeats, approaching fast. Ben's hand went to his rifle. Get back, both of you. Through the broken window, Eliza saw 3 riders. Not Hale, but men she recognized from town. Hard men, the kind who hired out for violence. They dismounted in the yard, spreading out with practiced ease. Mrs. Harper, one of them called. We know you're in there. Come out. Mr. Hale wants a word. Ben chambered around. Over my dead body. That can be arranged. Eliza's mind raced. They were outnumbered and outgunned. The cabin had 1 door, 2 windows, no back exit. If it came to a fight, they'd lose. But she had the ledger. She grabbed it, shoving it into her coat. Sarah, get behind the desk. Don't move until I tell you. Mama, do it. Now. Sarah scrambled behind the desk as Eliza moved to the door. Ben grabbed her arm. Don't go out there. They want me. If I go, maybe they'll leave you and Sarah alone. And maybe they'll kill all 3 of us. Ben's voice was low and urgent. "We hold them off until dark, then slip out the back window. Make a run for it. There's 3 of them and 1 of you, Mr. Murphy. Those aren't good odds. Better than surrendering." Outside, one of the men was getting impatient. "We're coming in, Mrs. Harper, one way or another." Eliza looked at the ledger in her hands, then at Sarah's frightened face peering over the desk, then at Ben's grim determination. And she made a choice. "Listen to me," she called out. "I'll come with you, but the girl and the foreman stay here, unharmed. You have my word I won't fight, but only if they're left alone." "Eliza, no!" She cut Ben off with a look. Then quietly, "Get Sarah back to the ranch. Give the ledger to Caleb. Tell him to finish this. He'll never forgive me if I let you go. He'll forgive you if you save his case." She pressed the ledger into his hands. "This is what matters, not me." Before he could argue, she opened the door and stepped into the yard. The 3 men watched her approach, their expressions unreadable. The one who'd done the talking dismounted and walked toward her. "Smart choice, Mrs. Harper." "Let them go first," he considered, then nodded. "Get out of here, foreman. Take the kid. Tell Caleb Mercer that Victor Hale doesn't appreciate interference." Ben emerged from the cabin, Sarah clutched to his side. His eyes met Eliza's, and she saw the apology there, the fury, the helplessness. "It's all right," she told him. "Go." They mounted up and rode hard toward the east. Eliza watched until they were out of sight, then turned to face her captors. "Where are you taking me?" "Mister, Hale's ranch. He wants to discuss your employment personally." "I'm employed by Caleb Mercer." "Not anymore." They bound her wrists, not brutally, but firmly, and lifted her onto a horse. As they rode west toward Hale's sprawling estate, Eliza felt the weight of her choices settling on her shoulders. She'd given up her freedom to save Sarah and Ben. She'd sacrificed herself to preserve the evidence that could destroy Hale. Now she just had to survive long enough for it to matter. Victor Hale's ranch house was nothing like Iron Ridge. Where Caleb's home was built for function and comfort, Hale's was built for display, a massive 2-story structure of imported brick and expensive timber, with columns flanking the entrance and crystal chandeliers visible through the tall windows. They took her through a side entrance, down a hallway lined with hunting trophies, and into a study that smelled of leather and tobacco. Hale sat behind an enormous desk, a glass of whiskey in one hand and a ledger open before him. He looked up as she entered, and his smile was cold as January frost. "Mrs. Harper, how kind of you to accept my invitation." "I didn't have much choice." "We always have choices. You chose to defy me, to hide behind Caleb Mercer's skirts, to pretend you could escape your obligations." He closed the ledger with a soft thump. "Those were poor choices. My husband paid his debt to you. I have proof." "Do you?" Hale's eyebrows rose. "How fascinating. I'd love to see this proof." Eliza's heart sank. He knew. Somehow, he knew she didn't have it anymore. "It's somewhere safe," she said evenly, "where you'll never find it." "I'm sure." Hale stood, moving around the desk with predatory grace. "But here's what I know, Mrs. Harper. I know that Caleb Mercer rode to Shepherd's Bend this morning. I know he's asking questions about our transaction. I know he thinks he can build a case against me. He stopped inches from her. And I know that by the time he gets back, you'll have agreed to work off your debt voluntarily, which makes any evidence he finds rather irrelevant. I'll never agree to that. You will. Because if you don't, my next visit won't be to you. It'll be to your daughter, that pretty little thing who's so good with horses. Accidents happen around animals, Mrs. Harper. Tragic, unpredictable accidents." The words landed like a fist to her stomach. "You wouldn't dare." "Wouldn't I?" Hale's smile widened. "Test me." Eliza's mind raced, searching for leverage, for an escape, for anything that might shift the balance of power. But she was bound, alone, and faced with a man who had no conscience and infinite resources. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to sign a contract, agreeing to work in my household for 1 year to satisfy your late husband's debt. At the end of that year, you'll be free to go. Your children will remain at Iron Ridge under Mercer's care. Everyone gets what they want. Except me. You get to keep your children alive. I'd say that's a fair trade." He produced a document, already prepared, and set it on the desk beside a pen. Eliza looked at it and felt the walls closing in. If she signed, Hale won. If she refused, Sarah was in danger. But if she signed, the ledger in Ben's hands became worthless. Caleb's investigation would be undermined. Hale would claim she'd come willingly, and who would believe otherwise? I need time to think. You have until morning. Hale gestured to one of his men. Take her to the guest room. Make sure she's comfortable. We wouldn't want anyone saying I mistreated her. They led her upstairs to a bedroom that was more prison than guest quarters. The door locked from the outside. The window was too high to jump from without breaking bones. A pitcher of water and a plate of bread sat on a small table. Eliza sank onto the bed and allowed herself 60 seconds of despair. Then she stood up and began looking for a way out. At Iron Ridge, Ben Murphy rode into the yard like a man possessed, Sarah clinging to the saddle behind him. Ranch hands came running, and Mamie burst from the cookhouse, her face pale. Where's Eliza? Hale's men took her. Ben dismounted, helping Sarah down. We were at the homestead. They were waiting. She traded herself for the girl and the evidence. What evidence? Ben pulled the ledger from his coat. Proof that James Harper paid his debt in full. Eliza found it. She made me bring it back. Mamie took the ledger with shaking hands, flipping it open. This could destroy Hale. If we can get it to the judge before he forces Eliza to sign some kind of contract or worse. Ben's jaw was tight. We need Caleb. Now. He's 2 days away. Minimum. Then send riders. Fast horses. Tell him what happened. Tell him... Ben's voice broke. Tell him I'm sorry. I should have fought harder. Sarah spoke up, her voice small but steady. Mr. Mercer said we should fire a shot if there was trouble. He said the hands would come running. Mamie looked at the girl, then at Ben, then at the dozen ranch hands gathering in the yard. She's right. Mamie's voice was hard as iron. We can't wait for Caleb. We go after her ourselves. Mamie, that's insane. Hale's got 20 men on his ranch. We'd be slaughtered. Then we don't go in shooting. We go in smart. She turned to the hands. Who here owes Caleb Mercer something? A job when you needed it? A second chance when you'd used up your first? A home when you had nowhere else to go? Every hand raised his arm. Then we ride for Eliza Harper. Not because Caleb told us to, because she's one of ours now, and we don't leave our own behind. The men looked at each other, understanding passing between them without words. Ben nodded slowly. All right, we do this quiet, we do this smart, and we bring her home. As the sun set over the Montana grasslands, turning the sky to fire and gold, the hands of Iron Ridge Ranch prepared for a fight they couldn't afford to lose. And in Victor Hale's mansion, Eliza Harper stared out a locked window and refused to give up hope. Because somewhere out there, a ledger was moving toward justice. And somewhere out there, people she'd known less than a month were risking everything to save her. She'd walked 7 miles through dust and heat to beg for her children's survival. Now others were walking into danger to secure hers. The symmetry was almost beautiful, if she lived long enough to appreciate it. The night pressed against the window like a living thing, dark and immense. Eliza sat on the edge of the bed, her wrists raw from where the ropes had been, and listened to the sounds of Hale's ranch settling into sleep. Footsteps in the hallway, voices downstairs, the creak of floorboards, the click of a door latch. She'd searched every inch of the room. The window was nailed shut from the outside. The door was solid oak with a lock that wouldn't yield to hairpins or desperation. A wash basin, a chamber pot, a small mirror, nothing that could serve as a weapon or a tool. She was trapped, but her mind was free, and it raced through possibilities like a caged animal looking for the gap in the fence. Hale expected her to sign his contract in the morning. He'd threatened Sarah to ensure compliance, but threats only worked if the person making them could follow through, and Hale was here while Sarah was 20 miles away at Iron Ridge, surrounded by loyal ranch hands and a foreman who'd already proven he'd risk his life to protect her. Hale's power was built on fear and distance. The closer Eliza looked, the more she saw the cracks in his armor. She just had to survive long enough to exploit them. Footsteps approached her door. Eliza stood, smoothing her skirt, forcing her breathing to slow. The lock turned. The door opened. Victor Hale stood in the doorway, still dressed despite the late hour, a lamp in one hand and a false smile on his face. I hope you are finding the accommodations acceptable, Mrs. Harper. I've been in worse prisons. This isn't a prison. You're a guest. Guests can leave when they choose. Guests who owe debts have limited choices. He set the lamp on the small table, casting long shadows across the walls. Have you given thought to my offer? It's not an offer, it's extortion. Such an ugly word. Hale settled into the room's only chair, making himself comfortable. I prefer to think of it as a business transaction. You provide labor. I forgive the debt. Everyone benefits. Everyone but me. You benefit most of all. Your children remain safe. Your reputation remains intact. And at the end of 1 year, you walk away with a clean slate. He leaned forward, his expression almost sympathetic. Think about what you're choosing, Mrs. Harper. Caleb Mercer may be rich, but he's one man. I own this territory. The merchants, the sheriff, the land office, they all owe me favors. If you refuse me, I'll make sure you never work again. That homestead of yours? I'll foreclose on the taxes. Your children? They'll end up in an orphanage in Denver while you rot in debtor's prison. You're lying. Caleb won't let that happen. Caleb Mercer is a rancher, not a miracle worker. He can't protect you from the law. Hale's smile turned cold. And I am the law in this territory. Eliza met his gaze without flinching. Then the law is corrupt, and corrupt things eventually collapse under their own weight. Brave words for a woman with no leverage. I have more than you think. The ledger? Hale laughed softly. Your foreman took it back to Iron Ridge. By now, Mercer's probably seen it, and he's probably riding back here ready to wave it in my face like some kind of victory banner. But here's what he doesn't know. That ledger proves nothing. Eliza's stomach dropped. It proves my husband paid you in full. It proves your husband wrote down that he paid me. It doesn't prove I received the money. For all anyone knows, he was a liar or a thief who took my materials and invented a payment that never happened. Hale spread his hands. Without a receipt bearing my signature, that ledger is just your husband's word against mine. And dead men's words don't carry much weight in court. The casual cruelty of it stole Eliza's breath. You planned this from the beginning. I plan everything, Mrs. Harper. That's why I win. He stood, adjusting his cuffs. You have until dawn. Sign the contract or I'll have you arrested for theft of services. The choice is yours. He left, locking the door behind him. Eliza sank onto the bed, her hands shaking with rage and fear. Hale was right about one thing. Without a signed receipt, the ledger was just evidence of James's record-keeping, not proof of payment. A judge might believe her husband's meticulous notes, but he might just as easily side with Hale's claims of fraud. She needed more. A witness. Someone who'd been present when James paid the debt. Someone whose testimony couldn't be dismissed. Her mind caught on a memory. James returning from town that February afternoon, frustrated and angry. Hale tried to cheat me, he'd said. Claimed the iron was higher quality than we'd agreed on, wanted an extra $20. But the blacksmith was there, heard the whole thing, backed me up when I refused to pay more than what we'd settled on. The blacksmith. A witness to the transaction. Eliza stood and moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Somewhere out there, Caleb was riding toward Shepherd's Bend to find that very blacksmith. If he could get the man's testimony, combine it with the ledger, they'd have a case even Hale couldn't dismiss. But Caleb didn't know she'd been taken, didn't know the timetable had collapsed from 21 days to less than 12 hours. She had to get word to him, had to find a way to delay Hale. Had to... A soft scraping sound interrupted her thoughts. She turned toward the window and saw something she'd missed before, a thin gap where the sash met the sill. The window was nailed shut, yes, but the nails were old, the wood warped by years of weather. If she could work one nail loose, then another, she might be able to open the window just enough to squeeze through. It was a desperate plan. A foolish plan. But it was the only plan she had. Eliza moved the wash basin to the floor, then carefully removed the small metal ring that held the soap. It was thin but sturdy, with a narrow edge. She wedged it between the window sash and the sill, working it back and forth until she felt the first nail shift. The metal cut into her fingers. The work was slow and silent and excruciating, but gradually, painfully, the nail began to give. At Iron Ridge, Ben Murphy was organizing chaos into strategy. The ranch hands gathered in the barn, faces grim in the lamplight, as he laid out the plan with the precision of a man who'd fought in range wars and lived to tell about it. Hale's ranch is built like a fortress, Ben said, sketching in the dirt with a stick. Main house here, bunkhouse here, corrals on the east side. He's got 20 men, maybe more. We're 12. We can't win a straight fight. Then what are we doing? Asked Tom Ridley, a young wrangler with more courage than sense. We're not fighting. We're extracting. Ben tapped the sketch. Eliza's being held in the main house, probably upstairs. We go in quiet, 2 teams. First team creates a distraction on the east side, maybe a small fire in the hay barn, nothing dangerous but loud enough to draw attention. Second team goes in through the kitchen entrance, gets Eliza out, and we're gone before Hale knows what happened. And if we're caught? We improvise. Ben's voice was hard. But we don't leave without her. Mamie stood at the edge of the group, her arms crossed. What about the law? If this goes wrong, you'll all be arrested for trespassing, maybe assault. Then we make sure it doesn't go wrong. Ben looked around at the assembled hands. Any man who wants out, no judgment. This isn't your fight. No one moved. All right then. Ben straightened. We ride in 2 hours. That gives us time to reach Hale's place just before dawn when his men are sleeping off the night shift. Dark enough for cover, light enough to see what we're doing. Sarah appeared in the barn doorway, Thomas clutching her hand. Both children's faces were pale and frightened. Is Mama going to be all right? Thomas asked, his voice small. Ben crouched down to the boy's level. We're going to bring her home. That's a promise. Mr. Mercer promised too, Sarah said quietly. That Mr. Hale wouldn't take us. But he took Mama instead. Your Mama made a choice. She traded herself to keep you safe. That's what parents do. Ben's throat tightened. Now it's our turn to make a choice. And we're choosing her. Sarah nodded, her jaw set with determination that made her look years older. When you bring her back, tell her I took care of Chance. Tell her he didn't spook once today. I'll tell her. As the hands dispersed to prepare, Mamie pulled Ben aside. You know this could get them all killed. I know. And you know Caleb will have your hide if anything happens to his men. He'll have to get in line behind me. Ben's expression was bleak. I let Hale's men take her, Mamie. I should have fought harder. Should have gotten yourself and Sarah killed? Mamie's voice was sharp. Eliza made the right call. She saved 2 lives. Now you're trying to save hers. That's how it works. We take care of each other. Even when it's dangerous? Especially then. Mamie squeezed his shoulder. Bring her home, Ben. Bring them all home. At Hale's ranch, Eliza had worked 3 nails loose and was starting on the 4th when she heard voices in the hallway. She froze, the soap ring clutched in her bleeding hand, listening. Check on her every hour. Hale's orders. She's locked in. Where's she gonna go? Just do it. Footsteps retreated. Eliza waited, counting her heartbeats, then returned to her work with renewed urgency. If they were checking hourly, she had maybe 40 minutes before the next round. The 4th nail gave way with a soft squeal of wood. Eliza held her breath, waiting for shouts of alarm, but none came. She gripped the window sash and pulled upward. It moved. Not much, maybe 6 inches, but enough. She looked down. The ground was 15 feet below, too far to jump safely, but a trellis ran up the side of the building, thick with dormant vines. If she could reach it, she might be able to climb down. Eliza squeezed through the narrow gap, her dress catching on the splintered wood. The night air hit her face, cold and sharp. She twisted sideways, forcing her shoulders through, then her hips. For one terrible moment, she was stuck, half in and half out, the window frame digging into her ribs. Then she was through, clinging to the sill with bleeding fingers, her feet scrabbling for purchase on the trellis. The wood creaked under her weight, but held. She climbed down slowly, testing each foothold, her heart hammering so loud she was certain every man on the ranch could hear it. Her feet touched earth. She stood in the shadow of the house, breathing hard, listening for pursuit. Nothing. Eliza ran. She didn't know the layout of Hale's ranch, but she knew north from the stars, and she knew Iron Ridge lay northeast. She kept to the shadows, moving between buildings, staying low. Voices drifted from the bunkhouse, men playing cards, laughing, unaware. The corrals stretched ahead of her, horses moving restlessly in the darkness. If she could take one, she'd have a chance. But the tack room would be locked, and riding bareback across open country at night was asking for a broken neck. Better to go on foot. Slower, but quieter. She'd made it past the last barn when a hand closed on her arm. Eliza spun, ready to scream, and found herself face to face with a woman she didn't recognize. Middle-aged, dressed in a plain work dress, her face weathered by hard years. "Don't scream," the woman whispered urgently. "I'm not going to hurt you." "Who are you?" "My name's Clara. I work in Hale's kitchen." The woman glanced over her shoulder, then back at Eliza. "I saw them bring you in. Saw you locked in that room. Are you the Harper widow?" Eliza nodded, wary. "Your husband did work for my brother-in-law. Good work. Fair prices. When he died, Victor Hale came sniffing around, claiming debts that didn't exist." Claire's expression was fierce. "He's done it before. To others. Uses the law to steal what he can't buy." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of watching good people destroyed by bad men." Clara pressed something into Eliza's hand, a small leather pouch. "There's money in there. Enough for a stage ticket out of the territory, if you're smart. And there's a note with the names of 3 families Hale ruined the same way he's trying to ruin you. They'll testify if someone asks." Eliza's fingers closed around the pouch. "Why would you risk this?" "Because someone has to." Clara's eyes were hard. "Now go. There's a trail behind the north pasture that leads to the main road. Follow it east and you'll hit Iron Ridge by dawn." "Come with me." "I can't. I've got family depending on this job. But you can finish what your husband started. You can stop Hale." Clara stepped back into the shadows. "Go. Before they realize you're gone." Eliza wanted to say thank you, wanted to promise justice, wanted to offer something in return for this extraordinary gift. But there was no time. She nodded once, fierce and grateful, then ran toward the north pasture. Behind her, in the main house, a man's shout went up. "She's gone! The widow's escaped!" Eliza ran faster. The night swallowed her whole, dark and vast and indifferent. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs trembled, until the sounds of pursuit faded into the wind. The trail Clara had mentioned appeared like a pale ribbon in the starlight, and Eliza followed it with the single-minded focus of someone who'd already lost everything once and refused to lose it again. Somewhere behind her, men on horses were searching. Somewhere ahead, dawn was coming. And somewhere in between, her children slept in a house that had become their sanctuary because a hard, silent man had decided that some things were worth fighting for. Eliza had never believed in fate or providence or divine intervention, but she believed in human decency, in the small rebellions of ordinary people against systems built to crush them. Clara's act of defiance, risking her livelihood, her safety, perhaps her life, was proof that goodness still existed in dark places. That hope still had teeth. The eastern sky was beginning to pale when Eliza heard hoofbeats behind her. She dove off the trail into a stand of sagebrush, pressing herself flat against the cold ground. 3 riders thundered past, Hale's men, their faces grim in the pre-dawn light. They didn't slow, didn't look back. They were searching ahead, assuming she'd keep running in a straight line. Eliza waited until the sound of hooves faded, then climbed back onto the trail and kept moving. Her dress was torn. Her hands were bleeding. Every muscle in her body screamed for rest. But she'd walked 7 miles through heat and dust once before, and she could do it again. This time, she was walking toward something instead of away. Ben Murphy and his team approached Hale's ranch just as false dawn turned the sky from black to gray. They'd left their horses a mile back, tethered in a cottonwood grove, and covered the last stretch on foot. 12 men, armed and silent, moving through the grassland like ghosts. Ben held up a hand, signaling a stop. Ahead, the ranch sprawled dark and quiet. Too quiet. "Something's wrong," Tom Ridley whispered. Ben felt it too. A wrongness in the air. A tension that suggested activity when there should be sleep. Then he heard voices, sharp and urgent, coming from the main house. "They're searching for something," Ben said. "Or someone." "Eliza?" "Maybe. Change of plans." Ben turned to the men. "We don't have time for subtlety. Half of you with me, straight to the main house. Other half, create that distraction we talked about. Make it loud, make it fast, and for the love of everything, don't get killed." They split into teams. Ben led his group toward the main house, using the shadows of the barns for cover. As they approached, a man emerged from the front door, one of Hale's hired guns, rifle in hand. Ben didn't hesitate. He stepped out of the shadows and planted his fist in the man's jaw. The guard went down without a sound. "Inside," Ben hissed. "Now!" They poured through the door into a hallway lit by oil lamps. Voices upstairs, angry and confused. Ben took the stairs 3 at a time, his gun drawn, the other men behind him. At the top of the stairs, they found Victor Hale in a dressing gown, his face purple with rage. "Where is she?" Hale snarled. Ben lowered his gun, realization dawning. "You lost her." "That bitch climbed out a window." "Good for her." Ben smiled, cold and satisfied. "Guess you're not as clever as you thought." Hale's hand went to his own gun, but Ben was faster. "Don't. You're outnumbered and outsmarted. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off your search. You're going to leave Eliza Harper alone. And you're going to pray that when this goes to court, the judge has more mercy than I do." "You're threatening me? In my own home?" "I'm making you a promise." Ben's voice was quiet and deadly. "You touch that woman or her children again, and there won't be a hole deep enough for you to hide in. Caleb Mercer's got evidence. He's got witnesses. And now he's got a dozen armed men who are ready to testify to your extortion and kidnapping. You've already lost, Hale. You just don't know it yet." For a moment, the two men stared at each other, the air thick with violence waiting to happen. Then, from outside, a crash and a roar. The distraction team had set fire to a hay wagon. Men shouted, running to put it out. Ben backed toward the stairs. "Time to go, boys." They retreated through the house, Ben covering their exit, and emerged into chaos. Flames licked at the wagon, smoke billowing into the dawn sky. Hale's men were scrambling with buckets, too focused on the fire to notice the Iron Ridge hands melting into the shadows. Ben and his team reached their horses and rode hard toward the east, triumph and worry warring in his chest. They hadn't found Eliza, which meant she was out there somewhere, alone, on foot, with Hale's men hunting her. But she'd escaped. She'd climbed out a window and run into the night rather than surrender. Ben found himself grinning despite everything. Caleb Mercer had called her resilient. Mamie had called her fierce. Ben was starting to think they'd both underestimated her. The sun broke over the horizon as Eliza crested a low hill and saw Iron Ridge Ranch spread out in the valley below. The sight of it, the barns, the corrals, the main house with smoke rising from the cookhouse chimney, nearly broke her. She'd made it, bleeding, exhausted, half dead with fear and effort, but she'd made it. Eliza stumbled down the hill, her legs barely holding her upright. Ranch hands spotted her and came running, their shouts bringing Mamie and the children from the house. "Mama!" Sarah's voice cut through the fog of exhaustion. Then small arms were around her waist, and Thomas was crying, and Mamie was easing her down onto the porch steps. "Easy, honey, easy. You're safe now." "Ben," Eliza gasped. "Where's Ben? He's alive. Took a team to Hale's place to get you, but you beat him home." Mamie pressed a tin cup of water into her hands. "Drink. Slow." Eliza drank, the water sharp and cold and perfect. "I have names, witnesses. People Hale cheated the same way he tried to cheat me." She fumbled with the pouch Clara had given her, pulling out the note. "They'll testify, if we can get them to court." Mamie took the note, her eyes scanning the names. "This is good. This is real good. But Eliza, you need to know, Caleb's still gone. He won't be back for another day at least." "Then we start without him." Eliza stood, swaying slightly. "We find these families. We get their testimony written down and witnessed. We build a case so strong that even if Hale owns the judge, he can't win. You need rest. I need justice." Eliza's voice was iron. "I'll rest when my children are safe. Not before." Mamie studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but you eat first. And you let me bandage those hands. Then we ride." As the sun climbed higher, warming the valley and burning off the morning mist, Eliza Harper sat at Caleb Mercer's kitchen table and ate the first real meal she'd had in 24 hours. Her children sat on either side of her, close enough to touch. Outside, Ben Murphy and his team returned, weary but whole, their faces lighting up when they saw her safe. And in Shepherd's Bend, 2 days' ride away, Caleb Mercer stood in a blacksmith shop and learned that James Harper had indeed paid his debt to Victor Hale in full, in cash, with the blacksmith himself as witness. The pieces were falling into place. The evidence was mounting. The truth, like water finding cracks in stone, was beginning to seep through Hale's carefully constructed lies. In 17 days, they would stand before a judge and lay everything bare. But first, they had work to do. The families on Clara's list lived scattered across 3 counties, their homesteads separated by miles of grassland and hard years. Eliza sat at Caleb's desk that afternoon, her bandaged hands resting on the ledger that had started everything, and studied the names written in careful script. Martin and Ruth Caldwell. Lost their dairy farm to Hale 2 years ago over a disputed equipment loan. Samuel Chen, Chinese laborer who'd saved enough to buy 10 acres, only to have Hale claim the land was encumbered by back taxes the previous owner had never disclosed. The Morrison family. 4 children left orphaned when their parents died of cholera, their guardian forced to surrender the family ranch to satisfy a debt for medical care that had never been properly documented. 3 families. 3 stories of lives dismantled by a man who wielded debt like a weapon.
"We'll need sworn statements," Mamie said, reading over Eliza's shoulder. "Notarized, if possible. The judge won't take verbal testimony seriously, not against someone like Hale. The nearest notary is in Grayson, 30 miles south." Ben leaned against the doorframe, his hat in his hands. "But there's a circuit lawyer who comes through every few weeks. Does land transfers, wills, that sort of thing. If we can track him down—" "No time," Eliza's voice was firm. "The hearing is in 17 days. We ride to these families, we get their stories, and we bring them back here. If they're willing to testify in person, their words will carry more weight than any paper." "And if they're not willing?" Ben asked quietly. "These folks have already lost everything once. Asking them to stand up in court against the man who destroyed them, that's asking a lot." "I know." Eliza met his eyes. "But I have to try. Because if I don't, Hale wins. And the next widow who comes to him desperate and alone will face the same lies, the same threats. It has to stop." Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face serious beyond her years. "Mama, can I come with you?" "No, sweet girl. You need to stay here where it's safe." "But you're going into danger." "I'm going to talk to people, that's all." Eliza reached for her daughter's hand. "Mr. Murphy will be with me, and Mamie will look after you and Thomas." "What if Mr.
Hale comes back?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Eliza glanced at Ben, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "If Hale comes back," Eliza said carefully, "you do what you did before. You fire a shot. The hands will come running, but I don't think he will. Not after last night. He knows we're ready for him now." She hoped that was true. But hope and certainty were different countries, and she was still learning the border between them. They left within the hour, Eliza and Ben on horseback, with supplies for 3 days. The Caldwell farm was closest, a half-day's ride to the southwest. As Iron Ridge shrank behind them, Eliza felt the familiar weight of leaving her children settle on her shoulders. Every time she rode away, a small voice whispered that she might not return. But that voice had been wrong before. It would be wrong again. The land opened around them, rolling grassland broken by rock outcroppings, and the occasional stand of cottonwoods. The sky stretched endless overhead, blue and vast and indifferent to the small dramas playing out beneath it. They rode in comfortable silence, the kind that came from shared purpose rather than friendship, until Ben finally spoke. "You did something brave last night, climbing out that window." "I did something desperate. There's a difference." "Not much of one." Ben shifted in his saddle. "Caleb's going to have questions when he gets back. About how I let you get taken in the first place." "You didn't let anything happen. I made a choice. A choice I should have anticipated, should have prevented." His jaw was tight. "I was in charge of keeping you safe, and I failed." Eliza reined her horse to a stop, forcing Ben to do the same. "Listen to me. You got Sarah out alive. You brought back the evidence that might save us all. You organized a rescue mission in the middle of the night with no guarantee it would work. You did everything right, Mr. Murphy. Everything. Doesn't feel that way. Feelings lie sometimes." Eliza's voice was gentle but firm. "The truth is, you've been a better friend to me and my children in 1 month than most people are in a lifetime. And I'm grateful. More than I can say." Ben looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his weathered face. "Caleb's lucky to have you here." "I'm the lucky one.
He gave us a home when we had nothing. He gave you a job. You gave him something he'd lost. Ben gathered his reins. Come on. We've got miles to cover before dark. They found the Caldwell place just as the sun was beginning its descent toward the western mountains. The farm was smaller than Eliza had imagined, just a cabin and a barn and a few acres of worked land. A woman in her 40s was hanging laundry, her movements economical and tired. She looked up as they approached, wariness crossing her face. Mrs. Caldwell? Eliza dismounted. My name is Eliza Harper. I'm hoping you can spare a few minutes to talk. About what? Victor Hale. The name landed like a stone in still water. Ruth Caldwell's hands stilled on the laundry, her knuckles white where they gripped the clothesline. I've got nothing to say about that man. Please. I'm not here to cause trouble. I just need to know what happened to you, what he did. Why? So you can write it down and feel sorry for me? So you can add my story to whatever collection of misery you're building? Ruth's voice was bitter. We lost everything. Our farm, our livelihood, our future. And nobody cared then. Why should they care now? Because he's doing it again. Eliza kept her voice steady. To me. To my children. And if we don't stop him, he'll keep doing it to others. But I can't fight him alone. I need testimony. I need people willing to stand up and say what he did. Ruth laughed, harsh and broken. Stand up? In court? Against Victor Hale? She shook her head. You don't understand. He owns the court. He owns the judge. He owns this whole damn territory. Maybe, but he doesn't own the truth. Eliza stepped closer. My husband kept records, perfect records. They prove Hale lied about a debt, and there's a blacksmith in Shepherd's Bend who witnessed the payment. We have evidence. We have witnesses. What we need now is a pattern, proof that this isn't an isolated incident, that Hale has been doing this for years. And you think that will matter? You think some judge is going to look at a stack of papers and suddenly grow a conscience? I think, Eliza said quietly, that doing nothing guarantees he wins, and I'm not ready to surrender, not when my children's futures are at stake. Ruth stared at her, and Eliza saw the battle playing out behind the woman's eyes, fear against anger, despair against hope, the terrible weight of having been broken once, and the even more terrible question of whether she had the strength to risk it again. Finally, Ruth's shoulders sagged. Come inside, I'll tell you what happened, but I make no promises about testifying. That's all I'm asking. The cabin was sparse but clean, with a fire burning in the hearth and the smell of bread baking. Ruth's husband, Martin, was a quiet man with calloused hands and sad eyes. Their story spilled out over strong coffee and growing darkness, each detail another nail in the coffin of Victor Hale's reputation. They'd borrowed money to buy dairy cows, the loan arranged through Hale's land office. The terms had been reasonable at first, 3% interest, payable over 5 years. But after 2 years of on-time payments, Hale had suddenly claimed they were in default. The loan documents, he said, had specified quarterly payments, not annual. The Caldwells insisted they'd agreed to annual terms, but when they went to produce their copy of the contract, they discovered it had been altered. Words crossed out, initials forged, dates changed. We took it to the sheriff, Martin said, his voice hollow. He looked at the papers and said there was nothing he could do, said it was our word against Hale's, and Hale's word carried more weight. Did you have any witnesses? Anyone who was present when you signed the original agreement? Just Hale's clerk, a weasel of a man named Davis, but he backed Hale's version of events, said we must have been confused about the terms. Ruth's hands trembled around her coffee cup. We lost the cows, then the barn to settle the supposed debt. By the time it was done, we had nothing left but this cabin and a few acres. Not enough to farm, not enough to live on. How do you survive now? Eliza asked gently. Martin does day labor. I take in mending. We get by. Ruth's voice was flat. But we don't live. We just exist. Eliza reached across the table and took the woman's hand. Help me change that. Not just for you, but for everyone Hale's hurt. Testify. Tell the judge what happened. Make them hear you. And if it doesn't work? If we stand up and speak out, and Hale still wins? Ruth's eyes were wet. He'll destroy what little we have left. He'll make an example of us. He might, but he might not. Eliza squeezed Ruth's hand. And even if we lose, at least we fought. At least we told the truth. That has to count for something. Martin spoke for the first time in several minutes. I'll do it. I'll testify. Ruth turned to her husband, shock and fear warring on her face. Martin, I've spent 2 years living like a whipped dog, Ruth, keeping my head down,
Accepting what happened as if it were some natural disaster instead of one man's greed. His voice was quiet, but steel ran through it. I'm done. If this woman is willing to fight, I'm willing to stand beside her. Ruth closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were fierce. Then we both testify, together. The relief that flooded through Eliza was so powerful it left her dizzy. Thank you, both of you. They spent the night in the Caldwell's barn, sleeping on hay that smelled of summer and better times. In the morning, Ruth gave them directions to the Chen homestead and a warning. Samuel Chen doesn't trust white folks. Can't say I blame him after what he's been through. You'll need patience with him. The Chen place was a full day's ride east through terrain that grew rougher and more desolate with each mile. They arrived as twilight was painting the sky purple and gold. The homestead was little more than a dugout carved into a hillside, with a small garden and a chicken coop. A man emerged as they approached, lean and weathered, with iron-gray hair pulled back in a queue and eyes that assessed them with the wariness of someone who'd learned that strangers rarely brought good news. Mr. Chen? My name is Eliza Harper. I'm hoping you'll hear me out. About what? His English was accented but clear. Victor Hale, and what he took from you. Chen's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. I have nothing to say about that. I understand your caution, but I'm not here on Hale's behalf. I'm here because he's trying to do to me what he did to you, and I'm trying to stop him. You can't stop men like Hale. They are too powerful, too connected. Maybe, but I have to try. Eliza dismounted slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. I have testimony from others he's cheated. I have evidence of fraud. What I need is your voice, your story. Why would you risk this for strangers? Because today it's strangers. Tomorrow it's my children, and I won't let that happen. Chen studied her in the fading light, his face unreadable. Then he gestured toward the dugout. Come, I will make tea. Then we will talk. The interior of the dugout was surprisingly comfortable. Warm from a small stove, with shelves carved into the earthen walls and a table made from salvaged wood. Chen prepared tea with precise, economical movements, then sat across from them. I came to this territory 15 years ago, he began. Worked on the railroad until my back gave out. Saved every penny. When I had enough, I bought 10 acres from a man named Morrison. Good land, creek running through it. I built a house, planted crops. For 3 years, I had something that was mine. What happened? Eliza asked softly. Victor Hale happened. He came one day with papers saying the land had unpaid taxes from before Morrison sold it to me. Said as the current owner, I was responsible. The amount was... Chen paused, his jaw tight. More than I could pay. I offered to work it off, but Hale said no. He wanted the land, so he took it. Did you fight it? I tried. Went to the land office. They said the taxes were legitimate, went to a lawyer. He said it would cost more to fight than to walk away. So I walked away. Chen's voice was emotionless, but his hands trembled slightly around his teacup. Built this place. Started again. Smaller. Poorer. But mine. Did Morrison know about the taxes when he sold to you? No. I asked him later. He was shocked. Said he'd paid every tax, had receipts to prove it, but his receipts disappeared. Lost in a fire at the land office. Very convenient. Ben leaned forward. You're saying Hale fabricated the tax debt? I'm saying the timing was very convenient for Mr. Hale. My land bordered his northern range. He tried to buy it from Morrison twice. Morrison refused. Then Morrison sold to me, and suddenly there were unpaid taxes nobody had mentioned before. Chen's smile was bitter. Draw your own conclusions. Will you testify to this? Eliza asked. In court? To what end? So Hale can take this place too? Chen shook his head. I have already lost once. I will not give him another chance. Then he wins, again.
Eliza's voice was gentle but firm. And he keeps winning until someone stands up and says enough. Why should that someone be me? I am alone. I have no power, no money, no influence. You have the truth. That's more powerful than anything Hale owns. Eliza met his eyes. And you're not alone. You have me. You have the Caldwells. You have a rancher named Caleb Mercer who's willing to put his entire reputation on the line to fight this. We're building something, Mr. Chen. A coalition of people who've been hurt by the same man. And when we stand together, we're stronger than you think. You have great faith in the justice system. No. I have great faith in people's willingness to do the right thing when they're given the chance. Sometimes that's enough. Chen was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. Then he poured more tea, the gesture somehow ceremonial. My father taught me that a man who does not fight tyranny becomes complicit in it. I have been complicit long enough. He looked at Eliza. I will testify. The relief was tempered by the weight of responsibility. Every person who agreed to stand with her was risking what little they had left. If they lost, the consequences would be severe. But if they won, if they could prove that Hale's empire was built on fraud and intimidation, it would crack the foundation of his power. And foundations, once cracked, tended to crumble. They spent the night in Chen's dugout, and in the morning he gave them directions to the Morrison orphans, who were being raised by their uncle on a struggling ranch 40 miles northwest. The ride took them back through territory Eliza was beginning to recognize, past landmarks that had seemed alien a month ago and now felt almost familiar. They reached the Morrison place just after noon, a weathered ranch house with smoke rising from the chimney and children's voices carrying across the yard. The uncle, Frank Morrison, was a broad-shouldered man in his 30s with tired eyes and a skeptical expression. He listened to Eliza's explanation in silence, then shook his head. I appreciate what you're trying to do, Mrs. Harper, but I can't risk it. Those kids have already lost their parents. I can't put them through more upheaval. I understand. But don't you want justice for your brother? For his wife? Justice won't bring them back, and it won't feed these children. Frank's voice was weary. Look, I know Hale's a bastard. I know he cheated us, but fighting him means lawyers, court dates, time away from the ranch, time I don't have, money I don't have. I'm sorry, but the answer is no. Eliza felt the refusal like a physical blow. She'd been counting on 3 testimonies. Now she had 2. I understand, she said quietly. Thank you for hearing me out. As they rode away from the Morrison ranch, Ben glanced at her. 2 out of 3 isn't bad. It's not enough. Hale's lawyers will argue it's a coincidence that 2 disgruntled former clients don't prove a pattern. Then we find more. There have to be others. In 15 days? When we don't even know where to look? Eliza shook her head. We work with what we have, the Caldwells, Mr. Chen, the blacksmith's testimony, James's ledger. It'll have to be enough. They made camp that night in a grove of cottonwoods beside a creek that ran cold and clear over smooth stones. Eliza sat by the fire, staring into the flames, while Ben tended the horses. You're thinking loud, he said when he returned. I'm thinking that I might fail, that all of this, the escape, the testimonies, the fight, might be for nothing, that Hale might win anyway. He might. Ben settled beside her, his back against a fallen log. But at least you tried. That counts for something. Does it? Will it count for something when my children are taken? When I'm forced into servitude? When... Stop. Ben's voice was sharp enough to cut through her spiral. You're borrowing trouble from a future that hasn't happened yet. Focus on what you can control. The testimonies, the evidence, the truth. Let the rest sort itself out. Eliza looked at him, this quiet foreman who'd risked his life for people he barely knew, and felt a surge of gratitude so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. Thank you, Ben, for everything. Thank Caleb. He's the one who decided you were worth fighting for. Where is he? He should have been back by now. Caleb moves on his own timetable. He'll be back when he's back. Ben poked at the fire with a stick. But I'd wager he's doing more than just talking to a blacksmith. Caleb doesn't do anything halfway. If he's gone this long, he's building a case. Eliza hoped that was true, but hope was a fragile thing, and fear had stronger teeth.
They rode into Iron Ridge late the following afternoon, tired and trail-worn but carrying something precious, the promise of testimony. Mamie met them in the yard, her face drawn. "What's wrong?" Eliza asked, dismounting. "Nothing's wrong, but Caleb's back, and he's brought company." Eliza's heart leapt. She hurried toward the main house and found Caleb in the study, maps spread across the desk, and 3 men she didn't recognize standing with him. He looked up as she entered, and something in his expression eased. "Mrs. Harper, you're back." "As are you. Mr. Murphy said you'd be gone longer." I was persuasive. Caleb gestured to the 3 men. "This is Robert Hayes, the blacksmith from Shepherd's Bend. This is Thomas Garrett, a lawyer who's been investigating Hale's business practices for the territorial governor. And this is Marshal William Drake, federal marshal assigned to this territory." Eliza stared at them, understanding dawning. "You didn't just get testimony, you brought the law." "I brought leverage." Caleb's voice was quiet but satisfied. "Mr. Garrett has been building a case against Hale for 6 months. Wire fraud, tax evasion, bribery. What he didn't have was direct evidence of debt fraud. Until now." The lawyer stepped forward, his expression intense. "Mrs. Harper, I need to see your husband's ledger, and I need to interview you about the circumstances of Hale's claim. If what Mr. Mercer says is true, your case could be the keystone that brings down Hale's entire operation." "I have more than just the ledger." Eliza pulled Clara's note from her coat. "I have names. People Hale's cheated the same way. 2 of them have agreed to testify." Garrett took the note, his eyes scanning the names. "The Caldwells. Chen. Morrison." He looked up. "I know these cases. I've been trying to find these people for months. How did you—" "Someone on the inside helped me. A woman who works in Hale's kitchen. She saw what he did to my family and decided it was time to fight back." The marshal, a tall man with silver hair and a weathered face, spoke for the first time. "That's dangerous. If Hale finds out, then we make sure her risk wasn't for nothing." Eliza's voice was firm. "We use what she gave us. We build the strongest case possible, and we make sure Victor Hale never does this to anyone again." Caleb moved to stand beside her, and she felt the solid warmth of his presence like an anchor. "The hearing is in 14 days. That gives us 2 weeks to coordinate testimony, prepare evidence, and make sure every piece of our case is airtight. Mr. Garrett, can you do that?" "I can try." The lawyer's expression was grim. "But you need to understand, Hale has influence. He's going to fight dirty. He'll try to discredit witnesses, bribe officials, delay proceedings. This won't be easy." "Nothing worth doing is." Eliza looked at each man in turn. "But we have something Hale doesn't. We have the truth, and people willing to stand up and speak it. That has to count for something." The marshal smiled, and it transformed his stern face into something almost kind. "Ma'am, in my experience, the truth is the most powerful weapon there is. It just takes courage to wield it, and from what Mr. Mercer tells me, you've got courage in spades." As the men dispersed to begin their work, Caleb touched Eliza's elbow. "A word?" They stepped out onto the porch, where the evening was settling soft and golden over the valley. Caleb stood with his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "Ben told me what happened, that Hale's men took you, that you escaped." "I did what I had to do. You could have been killed, but I wasn't." Eliza turned to face him fully. "Caleb, I can't live in fear of what might happen. I have to focus on what I can control, and right now, that's this fight." "I should have been here. You were doing exactly what needed to be done. You brought reinforcements. You brought hope." She smiled, small and genuine. "You did good." Caleb was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the horizon. "My wife used to say that doing nothing was the worst kind of cowardice, that standing by while bad things happened to good people made you complicit." His voice was rough with old pain. "I stood by once, when she died, when my daughter died. I stood outside that burning house and did nothing because by the time I got there, there was nothing to do. I've lived with that for 5 years. That wasn't your fault. Maybe not, but it changed me, made me careful, made me cautious, made me afraid to care about anything I might lose." He looked at her then, and his eyes were raw. "Then you walked 7 miles through the heat with 2 starving children and asked me for help. And something in me couldn't stay locked away anymore.
Eliza's throat tightened. Caleb, I'm not done. His voice was gentle but firm. What I'm trying to say is, you and your children, you've given me something I thought I'd lost. A reason to fight, a reason to care, and I'll be damned if I let Victor Hale take that away. We'll fight him together. Together. Caleb extended his hand and Eliza took it. His grip was warm and solid and sure. As they stood there in the fading light, hands clasped and futures uncertain, Eliza felt something shift inside her. Hope, maybe. Or strength. Or just the simple, powerful knowledge that she wasn't alone anymore. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that, she was beginning to understand, made all the difference. The 14 days before the hearing passed in a blur of preparation that left no room for doubt or fear. Thomas Garrett, the territorial lawyer, transformed Caleb's study into a war room, covering every surface with depositions, ledgers, and carefully documented evidence. Marshal Drake interviewed witnesses with the methodical precision of a man who'd built his career on turning fragments into proof. And Caleb moved through it all like the eye of a storm, quiet, focused, unshakable. Eliza found herself at the center of it, answering questions she'd never thought to ask herself. What time had Hale's men arrived at the homestead? Had James ever mentioned previous dealings with Hale? Could she recall the exact wording of Hale's threat against Sarah? Each detail mattered, Garrett explained, because Hale's lawyers would pick apart any inconsistency, any gap in memory, any hint of embellishment. The truth is your strongest weapon, he told her on the 5th day, when exhaustion had begun to fray her edges. But it has to be the complete truth, told consistently, without exaggeration or speculation. Can you do that? I can tell you what happened, exactly as it happened. Nothing more, nothing less. Then we have a chance. The Caldwells arrived on the 7th day, their wagon loaded with what little they could spare for the journey. Ruth embraced Eliza like a sister, and Martin shook Caleb's hand with the firm grip of a man reclaiming his dignity. Samuel Chen came on the 9th day, riding a mule and carrying a small pack. He moved through the ranch with quiet observation, studying everything, trusting nothing. "You're Mr. Mercer," he said to Eliza on the 2nd evening. "He is not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "A rich man trying to buy justice. Instead, I find a man who understands what it means to lose everything." Chen's gaze was thoughtful. "That makes him dangerous, to men like Hale." "Dangerous how?" "Because he cannot be bought, cannot be intimidated, and he has nothing left to lose except his honor." Chen smiled faintly. "That is the most dangerous kind of man." On the 11th day, word came that Victor Hale had hired 3 lawyers from Denver, men known for their skill at dismantling cases and destroying witnesses. The news sent a ripple of anxiety through the ranch, but Garrett met it with grim satisfaction. "Good. Let him bring his hired guns. It means he's worried, and worried men make mistakes." Sarah spent her days with Chance, the young horse who'd become her constant companion. The animal had gentled completely under her patient care, responding to her voice, her touch, the quiet confidence she'd developed through weeks of work. Watching them together, Eliza saw her daughter becoming someone new, someone strong, capable, unafraid. Thomas, meanwhile, had appointed himself Ben Murphy's shadow, following the foreman through daily ranch work and absorbing everything with the hungry curiosity of a child who'd found a hero. Ben bore the attention with surprising patience, answering endless questions and teaching the boy to rope, to read weather, to understand the language of horses and cattle and land. "You're good with him," Eliza said one afternoon, watching Ben show Thomas how to mend a bridle. "He's a good kid, smart, eager to learn." Ben's voice was gruff but warm. "Reminds me of myself at that age, before life got complicated." "Life is always complicated. We just get better at navigating it." "Is that what we're doing? Navigating?" Ben glanced at her. "Feels more like we're building a raft while the river's trying to drown us." "Then we build fast and hold on tight." Eliza smiled. "We've made it this far." The night before the hearing, Caleb called everyone to the main house. The dining room table had been extended to its full length, and Mamie had prepared a meal that filled the room with the smells of roasted meat, fresh bread, and apple pie. The Caldwells sat beside Samuel Chen. Marshal Drake and Thomas Garrett flanked the blacksmith, Robert Hayes. Ben and the senior ranch hands occupied the far end.
And at the head of the table, Caleb presided with Eliza to his right and her children to his left. It looked, Eliza thought, like a family. A strange, cobbled-together family united by circumstance and purpose, but a family nonetheless. Caleb stood, and the room fell silent. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, his voice carrying despite its quietness. "But I wanted to say something before tomorrow. Most of you have lost things to Victor Hale. Land, money, dignity. Some of you have lost more than that. And all of you are here because you're willing to stand up and say that what he did was wrong. That takes courage. More courage than I've seen in a long time." He paused, his gaze moving around the table. "Tomorrow, we go before a judge, and we tell the truth. Hale's going to fight us with everything he has: money, influence, hired lawyers. He's going to try to make you doubt yourselves, doubt each other, doubt that any of this matters. Don't let him. What we're doing here matters, not just for us, but for everyone who comes after. We're drawing a line. We're saying that there are some things money can't buy, some things power can't corrupt, and one of those things is justice." Ruth Caldwell wiped her eyes. Samuel Chen nodded slowly. The ranch hands sat straighter in their chairs. "So tomorrow," Caleb continued, "we walk into that courtroom with our heads up and our voices steady. We tell our stories. We show our evidence, and we trust that the truth is enough, because it has to be." He raised his glass of water. "To justice, and to the people brave enough to fight for it." "To justice," the room echoed, glasses lifting in a ragged chorus of hope and determination. After dinner, as the others dispersed to their rooms in the bunkhouse, Eliza found Caleb standing on the porch, staring out at the darkness. "That was a good speech," she said softly. "It was the truth. That's all I know how to give. Are you worried about tomorrow?" "I'm always worried, but worry doesn't change outcomes. Only preparation does." He turned to look at her. "Are you ready?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Eliza moved to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Caleb, I want to say, whatever happens tomorrow, thank you for everything, for taking us in, for fighting for us, for giving my children a home when they had nothing. They had you. That was never nothing. It wasn't enough, not alone. Maybe that's the point." Caleb's voice was soft. "Maybe we're not meant to do this alone. Any of it." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning that went beyond the hearing, beyond Hale, beyond everything they'd been fighting for. Eliza felt the weight of them settle in her chest, warm and terrifying and impossibly right. "After this is over," Caleb said carefully, "after the dust settles and the verdict comes in, I'd like to talk to you about the future, about what comes next." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I'd like you to stay, not as an employee, not as someone working off a debt or earning her keep, but as—" He stopped, searching for words. "As family. As someone who belongs here. With me. With all of us." Eliza's breath caught. "Caleb, you don't have to answer now. Tomorrow's complicated enough. But I wanted you to know, so you'd have something to hold on to if things get hard in that courtroom." She reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "I already know my answer, but you're right. Tomorrow first. Then we talk about the future." They stood there in the darkness, hands joined, and let the silence say what words couldn't. The courthouse in Grayson was a 2-story brick building that dominated the town square. By the time Caleb's party arrived, 3 wagons carrying witnesses, evidence, and hope, a crowd had already gathered. Word had spread through the territory like wildfire. The widow Harper was taking on Victor Hale. The impossible was attempting to defeat the inevitable. People wanted to see how it would end. Hale was already inside when they entered, flanked by his 3 Denver lawyers and a handful of hired witnesses. He looked every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit and polished boots. When his eyes found Eliza, his smile was cold and confident. "Mrs. Harper, still fighting the inevitable, I see." "I'm fighting a liar. There's nothing inevitable about the truth. We'll see what the judge thinks about your truth." Hale's gaze shifted to Caleb. "Mercer, I'm surprised you're still wasting your time on this. Surely you have a ranch to run." "I do, and I'm running it just fine. Unlike your operation, which I hear is under investigation for wire fraud."
Caleb's voice was mild, but his eyes were hard. How's that going? Hale's smile thinned. Careful, Mercer. False accusations can land you in legal trouble. Good thing mine aren't false, then. The bailiff called for order before Hale could respond. They filed into the courtroom, taking seats on opposite sides of the aisle. The judge, a silver-haired man named Cyrus Whitmore, entered from his chambers and settled behind the bench with the weary air of someone who'd presided over too many cases and believed in too few of them. This is a hearing to determine the validity of a debt claim filed by Victor Hale against the estate of James Harper, deceased, and his widow, Eliza Harper. Mr. Hale, your counsel may present your case. Hale's lead attorney, a sharp-faced man named Reynolds, stood and began his argument with practiced smoothness. James Harper had purchased materials on credit. The debt had gone unpaid. Territorial law allowed for the seizure of assets, or, in this case, labor contracts to satisfy such debts. It was all perfectly legal, perfectly straightforward. We have documentation of the original sale, Reynolds said, producing papers with a flourish. Signed by Mr. Harper himself, witnessed by Mr. Hale's clerk. The debt is legitimate, and Mrs. Harper's refusal to honor it constitutes fraud. Thomas Garrett rose for the defense. Your Honor, we contest both the existence of the debt and the legitimacy of these documents. May I present evidence? Judge Whitmore gestured for him to proceed. Garrett approached the bench with James Harper's ledger, opening it to the relevant page. This is Mr. Harper's personal record book, maintained with meticulous care throughout his life. As you can see, he noted the purchase of materials from Mr. Hale on February 14th of last year. He also noted payment in full, in cash, on the same date. Mr. Harper was known for his precision in record-keeping. He would not have made this notation without good reason. A man's personal records prove nothing, Reynolds countered. He could have written anything. Without a receipt bearing my client's signature, this is merely wishful thinking. Perhaps, but we have more than the ledger. Garrett nodded to Robert Hayes. I call Robert Hayes, blacksmith of Shepherd's Bend, to testify. Hayes took the stand, his calloused hands resting on his knees, and told his story with simple directness. He'd been present when James Harper paid Victor Hale in cash for the materials. He'd watched Hale count the money. He'd heard Hale try to demand an additional $20, claiming the materials were premium quality. And he'd heard James Harper refuse, citing their original agreement. Mr. Hale accepted the payment, Hayes said firmly. I saw it with my own eyes. Reynolds rose for cross-examination. Mr. Hayes, how much did Mr. Mercer pay you to come here today and tell this story? Nobody paid me anything. I'm here because I don't like seeing widows cheated. How convenient. And how much do you owe Mr. Mercer? Any debts? Any favors? Nothing. I met the man 3 weeks ago. Then why would you risk perjury to help a stranger? Hayes's expression hardened. Because I watched Victor Hale count out $50 in cash from James Harper's hand. I watched him pocket it, and I watched him shake James's hand and thank him for his business. If that's perjury, then my eyes are liars, and they're not. The courtroom rippled with murmurs. Judge Whitmore banged his gavel. Order. Mr. Garrett, do you have additional witnesses? I do, Your Honor. I call Ruth Caldwell. Ruth took the stand with trembling hands, but her voice was steady as she recounted her family's experience with Hale, the altered contracts, the forged initials, the sheriff who'd refused to investigate. Mr. Hale destroyed our livelihood, she said quietly, and he did it with false documents and legal intimidation. What he's doing to Mrs. Harper is exactly what he did to us. Reynolds attacked her credibility with surgical precision. Mrs. Caldwell, you lost your farm due to your own failure to read the contract properly. That's not fraud, that's incompetence. We read the contract, we sign the contract, and the contract we signed is not the contract Mr. Hale produced in court. Can you prove that? No, because the original disappeared conveniently. So you're asking this court to believe your memory over documented evidence? I'm asking this court to see the pattern, to recognize that one widow's loss is a tragedy. 2 is suspicious, 3 is a crime. Garrett called Samuel Chen next, and the pattern became undeniable. Chen's testimony about fabricated tax debts and lost receipts mirrored the Caldwell's story almost exactly. Different details, same method, different victims, same perpetrator.
By the time Chen stepped down, the courtroom atmosphere had shifted. The murmurs had grown louder. People in the gallery were leaning forward, engaged, angry. Hale's lawyers fought back hard, calling witnesses who testified to his good character, his business acumen, his contributions to the territory's development. But their words rang hollow against the mounting evidence of systematic fraud. Then Garrett played his final card. "Your Honor, I call Eliza Harper to the stand." Eliza rose, her legs steady despite the fear coursing through her. She crossed to the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Garrett's questions were gentle, methodical, building the story piece by piece. Her husband's death, her desperate circumstances, Hale's arrival with his promissory note, the threats against Sarah, her abduction, her escape. "Mrs. Harper," Garrett said quietly, "in your own words, tell the court what Victor Hale said to you when you were held at his ranch." Eliza looked directly at Hale as she spoke. "He said that if I didn't sign his contract, his next visit wouldn't be to me. It would be to my daughter. He said accidents happen around animals. He said it would be tragic, unpredictable." Her voice was calm, clear, devastating. "He threatened to hurt a 9-year-old child to force my compliance. That's the kind of man Victor Hale is." The courtroom erupted. Judge Whitmore's gavel came down like thunder. "Order! I will have order!" Reynolds stood, his face flushed. "Your Honor, this is hearsay and speculation. There were no witnesses to this alleged conversation." "I was there," Eliza said quietly. "I'm the witness." "You're the accuser. Your testimony is self-serving and—" "Mr. Reynolds," Judge Whitmore's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "I've heard enough, from both sides." He looked at Hale, and his expression was unreadable. "Mr. Hale, I've known you for 15 years, watched you build your empire, admired your success, but I'm not blind, and I'm not bought." Hale's face went pale. "This court finds the evidence presented by the defense to be credible and compelling. The testimony of multiple witnesses, combined with Mr. Harper's contemporaneous records and the blacksmith's eyewitness account, creates a preponderance of evidence that the debt in question was paid in full. Furthermore, the pattern of similar accusations against Mr. Hale suggests a systematic scheme to defraud debtors through document manipulation and legal coercion." The judge's gavel came down with finality. "The debt is declared void. The claim against Mrs. Harper is dismissed. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the Territorial Attorney General for criminal investigation. If half of what I've heard today is true, Mr. Hale, you're going to prison." Court dismissed. The room exploded into chaos. Eliza sat frozen in the witness stand, unable to process what had just happened. They'd won. Against impossible odds, against wealth and power and influence, they'd won. Caleb was there, helping her down from the stand, his hand steady on her elbow. "It's over," he said quietly. "You're free." Eliza looked at him and felt something break open in her chest. Relief, joy, grief for everything lost and everything gained. She leaned against him, and he held her steady while the world rearranged itself around them. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had swelled. People she'd never met pressed forward to shake her hand, to offer congratulations, to share their own stories of Hale's abuses. The marshal was already organizing an investigation, pulling together evidence, preparing to dismantle Hale's empire piece by piece. Victor Hale himself stood beside his lawyers, his face a mask of fury and disbelief. As Eliza passed, he caught her arm. "This isn't over. I'll appeal. I'll fight this all the way to the Territorial Supreme Court if I have to." Eliza looked at his hand on her arm, then at his face. "Let go of me. You've made a powerful enemy, Mrs. Harper." "No." Caleb's voice was quiet and absolute. "She's made a powerful friend. Several of them, actually. And if you ever touch her again, you'll answer to me." Hale released her arm, taking a step back. For the first time since Eliza had met him, he looked uncertain, afraid. "Appeal all you want," Eliza said calmly. "Investigate all you want. The truth doesn't change just because you don't like it. You lost, Mr. Hale. And you'll keep losing, because people are tired of being afraid of you." She turned and walked away, Caleb at her side, her children rushing to meet her. Sarah threw her arms around Eliza's waist. Thomas pressed against her side, and for a moment she just stood there holding them, breathing them in. They were safe. Finally, completely safe. The journey back to Iron Ridge was triumphant and exhausted in equal measure. The Caldwells rode in their wagon, singing old songs that echoed across the grassland. Samuel Chen sat beside Ben Murphy. The two men engaged in quiet conversation about farming techniques and shared histories. The ranch hands traded stories and jokes, the tension of the past weeks finally releasing. And in the lead wagon, Eliza sat beside Caleb with her children drowsing in the back, watching the familiar landscape roll past. "What will you do now?" Caleb asked. "With your homestead?" "I don't know. Return to it, maybe. Try to rebuild." Even as she said it, the words felt hollow. The homestead was just land. It held memories, but it wasn't home anymore. "Or," Caleb said carefully, "you could stay at Iron Ridge, not in the cabin, in the main house, permanently." Eliza's heart kicked against her ribs. "Caleb, I know what I said before, about wanting to talk after the hearing, but I've been thinking, and I don't want to wait." He turned to face her fully. "I want you to stay. I want your children to stay. I want us to be a family, not because of debt or obligation or convenience, but because—" He stopped, searching for words. "Because you've brought life back to a place that was dying. Because your children have given me a reason to hope again. Because when I look at the future now, I can't imagine it without you in it." "Are you asking me to marry you?" "I'm asking you to build something with me. A home, a family, a life." His voice was rough with emotion. "I'm not asking you to forget James, or to pretend this is some grand romance. I'm just asking you to stay, to let me take care of you the way you've taken care of everyone else. To let us be partners in this." Eliza felt tears streak down her face, hot and sudden. "I walked 7 miles to beg you to take my children. I never imagined you'd offer to take all of us. Not like this. Is that a yes?" "It's a yes." She laughed, the sound bright and breaking. "It's absolutely a yes." Caleb's smile was slow and transformative, lighting up his entire face. "Then we'll make it official. Whenever you're ready." "I'm ready now. I've been ready since the moment you refused to separate me from my children." Behind them, Sarah stirred from her doze. "Are we home yet?" Eliza looked at Caleb, then back at her daughter. "Almost, sweet girl. Almost home." They were married 3 weeks later on a Sunday afternoon, with the entire ranch and half the territory in attendance. The ceremony was simple. Words spoken on the porch where Eliza had once knelt and begged, vows exchanged under open sky, rings that caught the autumn sunlight and turned it to fire. Sarah stood beside Eliza as her witness, solemn and proud in a new dress Mamie had sewn. Thomas handed Caleb the ring with exaggerated care, then grinned when Caleb ruffled his hair in thanks. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Caleb hesitated, as if uncertain this was real. This was allowed. Eliza solved the problem by rising on her toes and kissing him herself, gentle and sure and full of promise. The ranch hands cheered. Mamie cried. Ben Murphy raised his glass in a toast that made everyone laugh and several people weep. And as the sun set over the valley, painting everything gold and crimson and impossibly beautiful, Eliza Harper Mercer stood with her husband's arm around her shoulders and her children pressed against her sides and felt the last of her fear finally drain away. Victor Hale's empire did collapse, exactly as predicted. The investigation uncovered decades of fraud, bribery, and extortion. Families came forward from across the territory with stories of debts that had never existed and contracts that had been altered. Hale was convicted on 17 counts and sentenced to 20 years in prison. His properties were seized and sold at auction to pay restitution to his victims. The Caldwells used their settlement to buy back their farm. Samuel Chen purchased 50 acres adjacent to his homestead and built a proper house. The Morrison children's uncle received enough money to secure their futures and expand his ranch, and Clara, the kitchen worker who'd helped Eliza escape, received an anonymous donation large enough to leave Hale's service and start a boarding house in town. She never knew where the money came from, but Eliza and Caleb exchanged knowing looks whenever her name was mentioned. Time moved forward the way it always did, seasons changing, children growing, grief softening into something bearable. Sarah became one of the finest horse trainers in the territory. her gentle touch and patient spirit transforming even the most damaged animals. Thomas grew tall and strong, learning ranching from Caleb and developing a head for business that would one day expand Iron Ridge into one of the most successful operations in Montana. And Eliza found that the life she'd built from desperation and necessity had transformed into something she'd never dared imagine. A partnership with a man who valued her strength, a home filled with laughter and purpose, a future bright with possibility. 5 years after that 7-mile walk through scorching heat, Eliza stood in the same yard where she'd once arrived with nothing and watched her children play with the younger siblings they'd gained. A daughter born 2 years into her marriage to Caleb, with his gray eyes and her stubborn chin. A son who'd arrived just last spring, already showing signs of his father's quiet determination. Caleb came to stand beside her, as he often did, his presence a constant comfort she'd learned to rely on. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That I'm grateful for all of it, even the hard parts, because they led here."
Do you ever miss it? Your homestead? Your old life? Eliza considered the question honestly. I miss James. I always will. But I don't miss that life. That life was about surviving. This life. She gestured at the ranch, the children, the home they'd built together. This is about living. There's a difference. Yes, Caleb said quietly. There is. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun descend toward the mountains, painting the valley in shades of amber and gold.
Somewhere in the house, Mamie was preparing dinner. In the barn, Ben was teaching the older children to rope. In the corrals, horses moved peacefully, safe and cared for. It was, Eliza thought, exactly what home should feel like. Not perfect, not without scars or challenges or the occasional hard day, but real, earned, built by hands and hearts that refused to give up. "Do you remember what you said to me that first day?" Eliza asked. "When I asked why you were helping us." "I said someone should have done it for me once, and no one did." "You were wrong, you know. Someone did do it for you." Eliza turned to face him. "We did. Sarah and Thomas and I. We gave you a reason to open that door you'd locked yourself behind, to let life back in, to try again." Caleb's smile was soft and genuine. "Then I guess we saved each other." "I guess we did." As twilight deepened and the stars began to emerge one by one in the vast Montana sky, Eliza Harper Mercer understood something she'd been too frightened to believe during those desperate months after James's death. That sometimes the end of one story was just the beginning of another. That sometimes losing everything made room for something better. That sometimes the bravest thing you could do was walk 7 miles through dust and heat and fear and ask for help. And that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the world answered with exactly what you needed. Not rescue, not charity, not salvation, but partnership. Family. Home. The simple, extraordinary gift of not having to face the future alone. Caleb took her hand, threading his fingers through hers the way he'd done 100 times before, and would do 1,000 times more. Together, they walked back toward the house, toward the warm light spilling from the windows, toward the sound of children's laughter and Mamie's voice calling them to dinner, toward the life they'd built from broken pieces and stubborn hope, toward home.